So my name is Oskian. I teach political theory at Yale. I was educated in France, and Montaigne was one of the reasons why I decided to go into political theory.
I'm Oskian and Smith. I teach at Yale. Montaigne has been a favorite of mine for many years, going back to graduate school, and I've been a continual reader of Montaigne over the years. The idea for a Montaigne course was, I think, my idea initially. I had taught bits and pieces of Montaigne in different courses over the years, an essay here, a couple of essays there. I'd never really tried to take on the book as a whole, the essays as a whole in one course. I wasn't sure I wanted to do it by myself, so I knew Julia was a reader of Montaigne and a lover of Montaigne. So I think the way it started was I asked her, would you like to teach this course with me? Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. That was your idea, and I also think it was. This is a consideration that I think we can make after the course, but I think that perhaps we had the intuition that such a text needs to be taught as a dialogue, because Montaigne's text is a text that he writes also to reach out from his castle and find many potential readers who are different from one another, and I think that there are different ways of getting to know and to love him, and so I learned as much from my conversation with you as I learned from the text.
That's what made the course so wonderful, is that we could each listen to each other, kind of feed off each other, and that I learned so much from it. Now that I think of it, the particular course we taught is actually required that two people teach the course, and although they typically prefer two people from different disciplines, we're in the same field, still we approached it differently, and really I think the students really benefited, and we benefited from different perspectives being offered, just sort of different ways of approaching a great book.
Yes, so Montaigne is not in the canon of political philosophy, but I think that trying to read him as a political philosopher allows us to think of politics in an expanded way and also in a deeper way. So my experience in trying to force myself to teach Montaigne as a political philosopher to students from political science and from the humanities, expecting to have a lot of politics in that, was the experience of teaching them and myself to find the roots of political problems and to have a sort of more rounded understanding of politics.
I think I would totally agree with that. Montaigne is not what we think of as a political philosopher like Machiavelli or Hobbes or Rousseau. There is a lot of politics in Montaigne. He was himself a deeply political person in his life, engaged often with diplomacy and negotiation with different factions, particularly religious factions in France at the time. This is in the period of the wars of religion, which he was deeply affected him and in which he attempted to mediate. So there is in many ways more politics in Montaigne than you might expect for someone who's not a philosopher of politics. But Montaigne takes you in so many different directions. Clearly he thinks about empire, the new world, the questions of imperialism, empire, the treatment of the native and his Brazilians in his essays on cannibals and on coaches. But there's so much, there's a rich set of reflections just on the most private matters, of the body, of pain, of friendship, of the pleasures of reading and conversation, which I think were the things that Montaigne loved the most. He loved books, and he loved reading and thinking and talking about books. And I think for people who love books and who love thinking and talking about them, Montaigne is your go-to guy in many ways.
Also, Montaigne was a judge and trained as a judge, and so he really asked questions about judgment in all domains. So how to exercise one's own moral judgment, political judgment, how to think of criminal law, how to really how to address ordinary life questions in a informed and wise way through this angle of judgment. So politics for him is everywhere because he can trust no rule, no general prescription. So every decision, every life situation needs to be addressed in this way, which we can call, broadly political.
To me, Montaigne is one of those writers that you can go to at different times in life and get very different things from. You can keep going back to him and you learn something very different from him, or you notice different things when you're reading him when you're 20 from when you're reading him when you're 60. I still have the copy of Montaigne that I use now is the one I got when I was in graduate school, and now it's completely marked up. But I see the things in it that I noted that when I was first read him, and they're not the things necessarily I note now. So I think he's one of these writers like Plato also that you go back to again and again. And at every stage in life, you find a different meaning and a different purpose.
I very much agree, and also I think another thing is that Montaigne is an author who occupied himself up to the point of his death with studying himself. So it's in a way the book is a display of attempts of self-knowledge. So you can see him revising his own text, adding. His rule was that he would never edit or erase anything, he would just add. So there is an idea of learning from the previous self, which you can really explore by looking at the text itself. Yeah, self-exploration I think is famously the task of philosophy. The inscription on the Delphian temple was know yourself, know thyself. And for Montaigne, I think self-exploration is something that we tend to consider easier than it is. Can self-exploration lead to any certainty, or is the self something which continuously escapes from us? And I think that's a very pertinent and provoking question in times in which we are exposed to a lot of books that are about self-help and that tend to produce solutions that are ready for application. Montaigne invites us to reopen the question.
It's funny you use that word self-help, which is something I was thinking of too. In many ways, I don't know if it would be right to say this was the original self-help book, but it is a kind of self-help book, although I agree, I don't think he doesn't provide you any formula for achieving this, but it is a very personal book. It's not to say it's the first personal book that's ever been written, but he did put himself at the center of the book in many ways. To understand the book is to understand a lot about Montaigne himself, and I just do think he asks us that in a way self-reflection, right? Know yourself is central to his philosophy.
Well, last year when we taught the class, we assigned our students this challenge, the Montaigne challenge. So we asked them to write in the style of Montaigne. So I did it too, just to be able to grade it, but I never shared it. Okay. So I have to confess that.
Will you bring it to the class?
If solicited and forced, I'm happy to bring it to class, or to produce a new one for this class.